Hi, this is Surya. Welcome back to Beyond Classroom. In parts 1 and 2 of this series, we built a complete IELTS map description, vocabulary, overview, and body paragraphs. In part 3, we focus on grammar, specifically 4 sentence structures that push your writing from band 5 or 6 to band 7 and above. Passive voice tense selection, relative clauses, nominalization, and participle phrases. We will use a new map to see exactly how these structures work in practice. Let's get started. First, let's have a look at the map. It shows the town of Oakfield in 2000 and in the present day, with Bridge Road running through the center. Let's do a quick analysis first. On the northern side, the factory was replaced by an apartment block, the car park became a shopping center, and the residential houses remained unchanged. On the southern side, only one thing changed. The library was converted into a community center. The open market and the hospital stayed as they were. 3 changes and 3 unchanged features. This will be our working example as we explore all 4 grammar structures. Before we look at the individual grammar structures, it is important to understand why they matter. The IELTS Band 7 descriptor for grammatical range and accuracy states that a candidate uses a variety of complex structures with some flexibility and accuracy. In simple terms, the examiner is looking for more than short, repetitive sentences. For map description specifically, this usually means 3 things. First, you should vary your grammar rather than repeating the same sentence pattern throughout the report. Second, you should be able to combine information within a sentence instead of writing a series of short statements. Third, you should use language that sounds more academic and precise. The 4 structures on the screen help you achieve exactly that. The first structure is passive voice tense selection. Instead of relying on a single tense, strong candidates use both the simple past and the present perfect where appropriate. The second structure is the relative clause. This allows you to add location or descriptive information directly into a sentence using words such as which and where. The third structure is nominalization. This means changing verbs into noun phrases, helping your writing sound more formal and academic. The fourth structure is the participle phrase. This is a more compact version of a relative clause and helps you avoid repeating expressions such as which was located or which was situated. Over the next 4 slides, we will look at each structure individually, see how it works, and learn how it can help move a map description from a basic band 5 response towards band 7 and above. Let's begin with a passive voice tense selection. Most map descriptions rely heavily on passive verbs because we are usually describing what happened to places and buildings rather than who performed the action. However, many candidates make the mistake of using the same tense throughout the entire report. To demonstrate greater grammatical range, it is useful to vary your passive structures where appropriate. The simple past passive, such as was demolished or was replaced, focuses on a completed change that took place during the period shown. The present perfect passive, such as has been constructed, places more emphasis on the result that can be seen in the present day map. Look at the examples on the screen. The factory was demolished. This describes the historical event. An apartment block has been constructed. This highlights the current outcome of the change. Now look at the final example, where both time perspectives are combined. The sentence, the library was converted into a community center uses the simple past passive to describe the completed change. The relative clause, which has since become a local landmark, uses the present perfect to emphasize the continuing result of that change today. This is a more natural and sophisticated description than simply writing, "The library was changed. It is now a community center." Using a mixture of past and present forms helps create the grammatical variety that examiners reward at higher bands. The second structure is the relative clause. Let me explain this in plain terms first. A relative clause is simply extra information that you add to a noun, connected by words such as which, who, or where. One feature that often separates stronger IELTS responses from weaker ones is the ability to combine information efficiently. Instead of writing several short sentences, strong candidates embed additional details inside a single sentence. Relative clauses help us do exactly that. First, notice the basic rule on the left. We generally use which for things and buildings, and where for locations and places. These are called non-defining relative clauses because they add extra information and are separated by commas. Now let's look at the examples. In the first example, we use which for a building. The factory, which had occupied the northwestern section, was demolished. Instead of writing two separate sentences, the location information is embedded directly into the sentence. In the second example, we use where for a place. Bridge Road, where the most significant changes occurred, divides the map into two distinct zones. Finally, look at the hospital example. The hospital, which has stood in the southeastern corner since 2000, remained unchanged. Here, the relative clause not only adds location information but also incorporates the present perfect tense, helping us demonstrate greater grammatical variety. These relative clauses make the writing more compact, more sophisticated, and easier to read. They also help candidates demonstrate the grammatical flexibility that is an important feature of Band 7 writing. Structure 3 is nominalization. The term may sound technical, but the idea is straightforward. Nominalization simply means changing a verb into a noun phrase. We do this in everyday English all the time. Decide becomes decision. Arrive becomes arrival. In the same way, in map writing, you do the same. Was constructed becomes the construction of. Was converted becomes the conversion of. And was demolished becomes the demolition of. Why is this useful in IELTS writing? Because nominalization helps create a more formal and academic style. Let's see how it works in practice. Compare the two examples on the screen. The basic version says, a shopping center was built where the car park was. The improved version uses nominalization. The construction of a new shopping center on the former car park site represents the most substantial development. Now look at the second example. Instead of writing, the library was converted, it became a community center. We can write, the conversion of the library into a community center was the only change on the southern side. Here, the nominalized phrase becomes the subject of the sentence. The third example shows another advantage of nominalization. Instead of writing two separate sentences, the apartment block was built. The library was also converted. We can combine both ideas into a single sentence. The construction of the apartment block and the conversion of the library represent the two most significant changes in Oakfield. This allows us to compare and summarize developments more efficiently. So, remember that nominalization can improve two IELTS criteria at the same time. It strengthens grammatical range and accuracy by introducing more complex noun phrases, and it strengthens lexical resource by using more sophisticated vocabulary. For this reason, it is one of the most useful tools to achieve a higher band score. Structure number 4 is the participle phrase. This is often easier than students expect because it is closely related to relative clauses. If you can write a relative clause, then you already know how to write a participle phrase. The rule is very simple. Remove which was or which were from a relative clause and keep the participle. For example, which was situated becomes situated. Which was located becomes located. And which was positioned becomes positioned. Participle phrases usually appear between commas and are particularly useful for adding location information in a compact way. Now look at the examples on the screen. The first example uses situated to describe location. The second uses positioned to describe direction and relative position. The third uses located to identify where a feature is found on the map. Notice that all three examples provide location information without creating an additional sentence or repeatedly using expressions such as which was located. As a result, participle phrases make descriptions shorter, more natural, and less repetitive. They are particularly useful in map descriptions where location information appears frequently throughout the response. Now let's see all four structures working together. On the left is a basic Band 5 style paragraph. The information is accurate, but the sentences are short, repetitive, and structurally simple. Notice how the same passive pattern is repeated throughout, with no attempt to combine ideas or vary sentence structure. On the right, we have the same information rewritten using the 4 grammar structures we have discussed. The indigo highlights show passive voice with a mixture of tenses. The factory was demolished and replaced, while the residential houses have remained unchanged. Using both past and present forms helps demonstrate grammatical variety. The orange highlight shows a relative clause, which had occupied the northwestern section. Instead of creating a separate sentence, the location information is embedded directly into the description. The green highlight shows nominalization, the construction of a new shopping center. Notice how a verb has been converted into a noun phrase, creating a more academic style. Finally, the red highlight shows a participle phrase located in the northeastern section. This adds location information in a concise and natural way without repeating which was located. The Band 7 version is longer, 64 words instead of 33. But that's not the main reason it is better. More importantly, it demonstrates greater variety, complexity, and academic register while describing exactly the same information. This is the kind of grammatical flexibility that helps candidates move towards Band 7 and above. Let's summarize Part 3 and the entire map description series. First, vary your passive tenses by using both the simple past and the present perfect. Second, use relative clauses with which and where to combine information and create more complex sentences. Third, use nominalization to convert verbs into noun phrases and create a more academic style. Finally, use participle phrases to reduce expressions such as which was situated to simply situated. When these 4 structures are used together, they help demonstrate the grammatical range and flexibility that IELTS examiners reward at Band 7 and above. This brings us to the end of the How to Describe Maps series. Thank you for watching. If you found this series helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.